We are rocking and rolling. We are on the second half of the show, and we have got an all-star guest with us that is coming back. We have Will Klusovsky. Now, he is got just a man of many talents, but he is largely into cybersecurity and developed and advisory services with getting project management underway. And he just wears several hats and really knows how to drive a business to the next level. So, Will, welcome back to Pivotal Change, sir.
Yeah, Ryan, thanks for having me. Glad to be here and hopefully answer some questions.
Yes, sir. And I always tell my audience to watch with a pen and paper. So hopefully, if you have any challenges, exercises, or for things that they need to go check on or implement, you make sure to shout those out to the audience. So what I want to do is I want to kind of get started on the cybersecurity side of questioning. And I want to start with maybe a theme on this segment of the show of new beginnings. We're still near the new year, and people are still re-looking over their yearly budgets, their yearly security procedures, HR policies, all kinds. And so I want to start with a business that's just beginning to prioritize. They're in the beginning stages saying, man, I really need this. This seems to be important. The world's changing. What are some of those most critical first steps in order for them to establish that strong foundation to protect them from any of those potential threats?
Yeah, the interesting thing about it is cybersecurity. People get kind of caught up on the technical side of it and sort of all the big scary stuff, but it really is about knowing your business processes and the things that you have. So absolutely, step one, and this is how anybody builds any kind of program in security is understanding what assets you even have. What and assets goes beyond your printers and your laptops, but also what applications do you have, what locations do you have, what data do you have, which is a big one. Understanding the data that you take into the organization, how you use and manage that data, data processes. A lot of companies will fail in having those process flows. So everybody always says, "Oh, well, this one email works this way and this thing does that," and then as soon as somebody like me shows up to do an assessment, and I start asking them questions, they're like, "Well, wait, that's Mary's job. Let me bring her in here." And then, well, okay, then what? Well, that's Bob's job. And then they don't realize how complicated and how all this data gets spread apart. So step one is getting an idea of that environment and getting a hold of it, and then being able to say, okay, this is what I have. How important is it? And what's more important? What's at risk?
Yeah, so really getting that comprehensive understanding, like you said, not just of your assets, but of your people and their responsibilities of those assets. And I think everybody's really afraid of probably two major things: the data breach, where they just simply got a hold of your information. And I think the other one that really scares people is ransomware type of stuff. But I can also see, would you tell me, or if you know off the top of your head, which is more common? An internal cybersecurity risk, like an employee steals, uses, or misuses, either through negligence or maliciousness, internal data and processing, or remote attacks through phishing, scams, and Trojan horses and things like that.
It's funny because the answer is both, because they
Yeah.
kind of go hand in hand. So if you look at like the IBM cost of a data breach report, I think they say of all, like, ransomware is like the number one thing that happens, but it doesn't just happen. There's a process to get it into the environment and to be able to deploy it. And that is usually through things like phishing and social engineering. So the reason that the answer is both is because that's what happens is typically they will leverage something, but somebody internally, whether they get their credentials or they just convince them to do something they're not supposed to, because most people aren't really doing anything. They're not malicious. They're not doing things with malicious intent. They're just trying to be a nice person and provide customer service. So they're responding to the person they think is IT on the phone and giving something up that they're not supposed to, and then that's how the breach happens. And so that part of like where ransomware is the highest one, if you look deeper into that, a good, I think, 25% of all the breaches are human error,
Mm.
which is potentially attributed to that, as well as then there's a small sliver of like we had we misconfigured something. So the majority of things are getting done because of there's people involved.
I got you. Yeah, people trying to be nice. So understanding your people, giving them good internal training and directives, and of course protocols to follow. That's pretty good place. So you had mentioned too in your last one about determining kind of the orders and the workflows and having to call in different people once that you start doing your assessment and asking different questions. Um, Tell me a little bit more about, how do you determine the order? What would be a good way for somebody to say, hey, I need to get an order so that I can protect myself the best? What's step one, step two, step three, as far as like how a workflow should flow? And I know I want you to talk kind of on a large umbrella because each industry is different.
For
But
sure.
there's got to be some considerations that people can build off of, surely, right?
Yeah, I think again, your niche is going to define some things, but at the end of the day, it's really doing a business impact analysis, which is taking all those assets, all of that data that you have and know, and then starting to look at how important is this to my business, right? Is this the data that actually makes me money? One, that kind of important. The other kind of importance is this something that a regulatory organization will find me for if I lose this, or if it ends up being uh, mishandled, things like that, right? So you've got two things that are going to drive what you even need to protect to begin with, and then it's a matter of, well, how much do I need to protect it? So the nice thing about regulations is they kind of give you those guidelines to say, here's what you have to do, and here's how you have to protect it. But for stuff that's business critical, you may not have those. So you'll start to look at what you have and where it is, and then it's kind of like we talked about with the ransomware stuff. Okay, how can I lose? Like, how can this get breached, taken away from me, exfiltrated, whatever you want to say? How can it harm my business, and what's the ways that somebody could get in there? So the old adage is, I always say, don't put laser beams in your air vents before you lock your doors, right? If your door is wide open, it doesn't matter that you put a bunch of really expensive controls to the hard to get to place that people aren't probably going to go with. The same goes with, if this piece of data or this asset is only worth $100 to me, if I lose it, then I don't need to spend $10,000 making sure that it doesn't go away.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And your laser beams and air fences, I could tell a funny police story when we have more time or on another day about that exact situation. But that gets me kind of moving in the long way. So they're developing a system. They're developing the 1, 2, 3, which is more important, which is I want to say worthy of protection, the $100 thing that I
Risk.
can just replace, or the $1 million data breach, right? And so once we do that, now we've built, okay, I feel safe. Now inside of these security parameters, I need to start getting my product and getting my services out to people. And so you're going to help people say, hey, now we're protected, we're in compliance with regulatory, we're in compliance with what your insurance policy wants, and just using good, sound security measures. Now let's go deliver the product. Let's build a platform to deliver that product, interface back and forth with the customer, and get business done. How do you start that approach and identify the stages or the phases that take you into those delivery needs?
Right. That's kind of your typical product management life cycle that exists. And I say that for those people who have ever, built a piece of technology that they want to sell, it's pretty common practice, but people kind of forget you need to do that around services as well. You need to understand where you are today, what the demand is for that service, and how you're going to deliver it, and then associated with what the risks are around that, right? So how do you protect against those risks? And again, similarly, how expensive is it to protect it versus how much do I have to versus how much do I spend on it, right? That kind of stuff, and then having a plan of what does this look like in the future? How am I going to be able to improve upon it, to keep it market relevant, that kind of stuff. So I think it goes back to that planning aspect of things, which I'm a big person that says before you do anything, like, spend a little extra time planning. It will always work out it will always be beneficial in the end.
Yeah, I think that's so great. And I think a lot of us get caught in that daily grind, that daily rush of I just need to produce, that we don't ever take the breath, track our process, write the important things down, and say, oh, yes, it does have to flow from A to B to C to D. We can't jump straight to F. Otherwise, we have to throw it back to B and start all over again practically. And people will see these systems. If they want customer satisfaction, they need to have taken that pause to understand what's the best way to overcome these objections or not have to process refunds because they're mad at us. And we can go work this on. So I think that's really good. You said a lot of really important details. I hope everyone that heard that goes back and re-listens or was writing them down. Those are going to be good, juicy bullet points for you in your future. So continue along the line of first steps. Beginning to develop cybersecurity and service management processes together is very, very important, right? They're ultimately going to go hand in hand, but there's got to be some type of just common pitfall that you can say, hey, hey guys and gals out there, I see this happen all the time, and I see this happen all the time. Can you shoo our audience here away from a couple of those common pitfalls of either skipping something, neglecting something, getting too redundant? But what can you help us with as far as security and processes?
Yeah, I think about, common pitfalls, right? So if you're thinking from a product standpoint, from a services standpoint, um, one, trying to make it too perfect too fast and realize you kind of need it to get out and get some feedback. That's kind of a standard in the startup world. So anybody's ever created something from scratch, they know you don't wait to get it perfect. I think the biggest pitfall from a security standpoint is not thinking about the security up front as part of that design process, that develop process, whatever, again, with whatever it is you're building, selling, or doing. Because almost always, if you just try to bolt the security on after the fact, it's not necessarily going to fit. Right? And you're going to come into you're going to come into conflicts and problems, and you're going to have it may impact user capabilities, or use friendliness. That's the word for it. Or and end up then you end up pulling it out because, well, it doesn't work with the product or doesn't work with the service. So I think thinking about it in tandem at the same time, again, doing that planning, and not ignoring it to begin with.
I really, really like that. Making security a part of that development and building process. Don't just go do something and look backwards and say, "Oh, now how am I going to protect all of this?" But build it along the way. We had an incident with our police department where we got to move into somebody else's old building. Well, this building was not a police department. It was a utility building that fit square footage, our needs, but we spent decades retrofitting it over time to make it function as a police department, and ultimately it was much better than where they came from. But it was a lot bigger of a project than they intended. So this has all been really great about talking about beginnings and where to start and how to get our first processes going. I'm going to put a pin in right here. We're going to jump to a break real quick, Will. Then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about looking to the future. So everyone else, stay tight. We got one final segment, and we're going to be looking to the future with Will when we come back for more Pivotal Change.